Yeah, the VA stuff is, I mean, that's gold, dude. Total
Oh,
gold.
dude, we'll talk about it. But welcome back, everybody. Best hour of their day. Nate and I were just talking, and I was like, we've been talking way too long. We missed so many gems here. But I've got my buddy on here, Nathan Holiday from The Level Method, and we'll get into a lot of what he and his crew do and how they provide value. I've worked with him in the past. I really dig what they do. But I know you're a crazy busy guy, so I appreciate your time, man. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
We were talking a little bit. You're in the middle of like moving your gym, like kind of,
Yeah.
sort of. Yeah.
Yeah, so this very, very lucky timing. Sometimes things just work that way, but for me, about 6 months, we're planning this merge to move my members over to a local gym for a variety of reasons. And the lease was up on April 1st. So like right in the high times of all the pandemic, we closed down and merge everybody over. Now it's an ongoing process. We're doing a
Yeah.
lot of virtual coaching still, all that sort of stuff, but hopefully that ties up pretty soon.
And sometimes luck is on your side, sometimes it is not.
Oh, dude, yeah, totally. Yeah, a lot of times it hasn't been.
Yeah, well, listen, you and me both. So we were talking right beforehand, and I've had this conversation a little bit before. Do you know Matt Albrizio from Forever Fierce?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he and I did a podcast on the VA, like literally just that.
Oh, he's a
And
big VA guy.
he's a big VA guy. And so if anybody doesn't know what we're talking about virtual assistants. So I got one about a month ago. And then how long have you been using one?
I started the big project in mid 2018, so it's been
Okay.
about a year and a half to almost 2 years.
So the first question is, have you had the same one the whole time?
I've had two. So I originally hired four because I had no idea
Okay.
what I was doing, and then two of them dropped off. Like a couple of one of them disappeared totally, and then one of them just quit because she couldn't deal with the thing. And then I've had two the whole time since then.
Yeah, what we were talking about beforehand is I had one in the past, and one of the key I think there's two key components, and I'll let you hop in on this too. In my experience, I think there's two key components of utilizing a VA efficiently. One is you have to understand, you have to teach them. Like they don't just like magically know how to do things, right? And everybody gets frustrated with that, which I think is a little odd. Like, I don't know why you would have that expectation. There's no other job where like people just know what the hell to do. And the second one is you have to really put some thought into like what the appropriate tasks are to give a VA. Because if you give them the wrong tasks, it won't work out. And that's not on the VA. That's on me if I gave them the wrong tasks. So I'm curious if, like, for those who have listened to this and are getting a bug in their ear, like, what would be your advice with regard to that?
So a couple things, like a VA is the getting someone to do tedious tasks for you is the absolute fastest way to leverage anything in your business. So this was something on my radar for many years, and I never really got it. And then I went to this seminar, buddy that had this one guy was talking about VA. So I left that seminar with just this idea that I really needed to get this in place. So then I started on this big project of getting them. And some of the things, the biggest secret for VAs that I found, and this is like a massive hack, is to, with any task, anything that you do that's tedious, record a video, a screenshot, a screen flow of yourself doing it, and then have the VA create an exact written process of exactly what it is, and then keep that in your records, in your files, so that if the VA does leave, you got the process and you can give it to another VA just in 5 seconds.
And the video, and you didn't have to do the written process.
And you don't exactly. And then so the all of my processes, it starts with creating the process, and then the great thing is also that you can tweak processes over time. So you can do another video, change something, and they'll add it in. So then you create a database of all these different processes, and I run it through Trello. And then I just shoot a Trello.
I do too. Yeah. So, and I hate project management systems like Slack. I want to blow it up. What's the
Slack's
other one?
Slack. There's
Slack
Asana, there's Trello, there's
Trello.
Like
there's a ton.
Monday.
Mondays. What's the other one? The old school one that has like the little weird picture of a mountain. It's like
Basecamp.
Basecamp. I hated that one too. I actually really kind of dig Trello. Like it
Feels
has
simple.
yeah,
The
and it has
Kanban
the
board.
functionalities that you need in there, which is like notifications in there. I can like it's just a good tracking tool. So anybody who's not kind of looked into Trello, coming from a guy who hates project managers because I think they're just far too complicated. Trello is you could get it sorted out within a week
It's super
on the long
simple.
end. Yeah.
Yeah, you just imagine note card or post-it notes in
Yep.
lines on the wall, and one of them is like, okay, do this task, and the second column is doing, so in process, and the third is ready for review, and you just
Yeah.
move them.
Yep, you move in and you can put as much stuff. You can put checklists in the cards. You can put due dates. I can assign it to somebody that notifies them and notify. I mean, like you can. And so what I've done for a lot of mine is in the card, it's got the task. If it needs a checklist, it has a checklist. Those checklists might have dates on them. I sign who I want it to, and in the card, if I have a video that needs to accompany it, I put the link to the video in
Exactly.
there. And I don't know what you use for video. I started using Loom about a year ago. Um, and the only reason I like it more than any of the other ones is because there's no upload download. I just record it and it immediately gives me a link. And I just
Mm.
change the title and share the link. So
Oh, that's
it was
cool.
always a pain in the ass to like record something on QuickTime, upload it to YouTube or Vimeo or something like that, and then have to share it from there. It's immediate. Like it's the second I hit stop on the record, it'll bring up a web page, and then I just change the title and I can share the link in like 30 seconds.
Yeah, I use
It's
Cloud
way
App.
easier.
Same,
Okay.
very similar, very similar.
Yeah, yeah. The reason I forget where because you can do just screen capture, you can do a video, or you can do video in screen capture. So I can put
Mm-hmm.
myself on the video too. So I dig that. But that's a good way to clean up a lot of the weird niche things in your systems that are hard to put in writing, which is like, the tab is over here. It's not super user friendly. And it's so if you're trying to use a VA, I agree with you. And that's clockwork in a sentence
Right.
written by Michael Michalowicz. He's like, screen capture everything, share it, and that's what you do it. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, that's cool. This is the first time I've ever used one where I'm starting to get traction and I'm like excited about it. Like I started with like 5 or 6 things, and now
Dude,
I've
it's
got.
like a magical power.
Oh,
It's a
dude,
fucking power. You go to sleep and you wake up when there's things done. Like
I know.
when that started happening, I was like, I couldn't believe it. My brain was just constantly like just buzzing. I'm like, dude, this is so cool.
Well, the mistake is we typically like to give people, because people they want to be involved in the gym more, they want to work more, but more often than not, these folks, the tasks that I give them don't fall within their natural skill sets. Where
Right.
if I'm going to get a VA, I'm hiring for people that like are good at that shit. Like they're
Right.
good at spreadsheets, they're good at like workflow and project management. So like it's incredible. Like I think everybody should do it and start taking off all those tasks. Like you want reports pushed to you every day or every week, like do that stuff. Yeah,
It's like one of the
I'm good.
one of the things was that for a long time, like I sort of didn't pull the trigger on VAs because I didn't really know. I was like, what am I gonna do with a VA? Like I hadn't made the jump with everything that you do that you don't like doing.
Oh, exactly.
That's a task that happens in the same way every time. You know,
Yep.
that's it. It's like as a business owner, all of my retail was done that way. Everything, like it just is like. It was crazy.
If I'll give there's a ton of specifics that I could give, and Matt and I talked about this, and I've been adding to it ever since we had the conversation. But here, if somebody just wants like a big, like vague answer, the VA can be your first go-to for all the good idea fairy things. Like somebody walks in the gym, is like, "Hey, we should do whatever," meaning like they want you to do it because they think it would be cool. And by this person that walks in your office, I mean it's generally an employee who comes in to give you work.
Right. It
And
happens
I'm
all the
like,
time.
all the time. They're just like, "Hey, I think we should do that." I'm like, "Yeah, that sounds like a lot of work. Thanks." That is what you could do. So it's just like think about all of the things that you could do that would enhance like your members' experience, like sending out birthday cards, emails, like
Exactly.
gift cards, all that stuff. Like if you just start just with those touch points, like that you're not doing, that you want to do, that you don't have time because you forget and don't want to, and the person that you gave it to forgot, right? Like all that stuff is the stuff that you can start with. So
It's like a great example of that we did with social media was I just had a recurring monthly task to look through all the members' birthdays, take
yep,
all the members' birthday, move them to a spreadsheet, and then create posts for each one of the people, put the thing, created in Canva. The Canva is also a set of tasks that she
Yep.
knows how to do. And it's just like, now you have birthday posts done, it's
Yep.
just like, it's crazy.
Which is cool because this is the social media is a slippery slope. So having somebody do social media content that's
Different.
not a CrossFitter is not a good idea. But this is different because that's a very specific task that if I
Exactly.
line it up and I'm like, this doesn't have to do with like CrossFit or training or anything like that. This is member highlight. You should absolutely give them that, right? Be like, hey, on their birthday, you're going to make a post. You're going to tag them, go search out, find out who they are, like whatever, create this. Here's the template. Boom, put it up there. All the things that you kind of want to happen systematically that are super important, like those are the things that you give them, not write an article about the importance of hip extension. Like that's not what they do.
Right.
So I think it is important to make a distinction. If you are going to have them do social media, it should not be anything that is educational in nature. It should be, member centric.
Right.
Cool. Well, anyway, let's talk about level method, man.
Yeah.
So I'm not even going to attempt to explain it because I will butcher it. So kind of give people your pitch for level method and what it is before we get into like why it's valuable.
Yeah, so level method is just a ranking structure. Originally, is just a ranking structure to show people where they were in fitness and give them a map to get better. And then over time, it really developed into a power of moments tool to highlight people and to engage the community and, really accelerate coaching calls and goal setting sessions and that sort of stuff. But essentially, it's designed to put somebody, plug them into fitness faster than they would naturally be plugged in, because there's so many different variables within fitness, and someone comes in and they're totally overwhelmed, and all we're doing is we're pinholing, we're taking all the amazing things that are around and we're just focusing them on a set number of things and then helping them map a plan out. That's really what the level method is.
Yeah, I don't know, like first time we sat down and talked about this was probably like 2 years ago, maybe a little bit longer, but I've always explained it of there. So there's this concept in CrossFit. So like the definition of CrossFit obviously is, constantly varied functional movements executed high intensity. Well, functional movements pretty obvious, should be natural in that sense. Intensity, like people misinterpret it, but have like an idea of what it is. The variance piece, nobody really understands, in my personal opinion, until they sit for the level one and we can explain it a little bit more, because it's like, yeah, we just do something different every day. And I'm like, yes and no, right? Yes, yes, we're doing something different, but it's not random. There is a thought process behind it. So I think what you have done with regard to level method is taken this abstract monster of variance and made it about as clean as you could make it, in my opinion. Right. And I don't think you'd be offended by this. Like, it's not perfect because I don't think it can be perfect. And I don't think you think you think it that, but in my opinion, it's about as clean as you could make that concept, right? Like with the application and how it works.
Yeah. I mean, the challenge is, it's a ridiculous. It's like, you can go into so many different areas, so many different ways. And so there are compromises, there are always compromises that you have to make. And it's, there are a number of compromises, and that's just how it goes with any project.
Yep. So for anybody that hasn't seen it, I guess visually, if you were looking for it, so it's twofold, right? So it gives people some immediate metrics or bars to shoot for, right? So imagine I'm climbing a ladder. It basically identifies like the first rung on the ladder I should be shooting for. But also the visual of it is very nice. So for most people, I know it's built off of the jiu-jitsu kind of belt level, but visually it kind of looks like a periodic table is kind of what I so kind of walk people through that without, diving, because it's fairly intensive.
It can get really complex. So there's like 350 squares, right?
Yeah,
And they all go along. And it's a little overwhelming, honestly. This is something that we've worked a lot to really lower the complexity of it. But it starts with white on the left-hand side, and it moves up to black and then red, going all the way down from left to right. And then there are 15.
Oh, you guys added red?
Yeah, so we have red now. Okay. And it's the same. Red is now what black was. But we've blown out the beginner. So from white to blue is now, there are many more steps.
Got it.
Between white and blue.
Okay.
And so, yeah, and it just goes from, there are 15, sorry, I'm like, vertically, there are 15 categories.
Mm-hmm.
So going down, there are 15 categories, and each one of these categories is sort of testing a different thing. We got like front
Mm-hmm.
squat, upper body pull, and so on. And then
Yep.
so someone will do an assessment in each one of these, and then they'll get, like, if you imagine from left to right, bar graph of their
Mm-hmm.
different strengths and weaknesses. So they'll have a big strength that it goes all the way to the black, and then they'll have some weaknesses that go all the way like into yellow or, you know, lower levels. And then someone just highlights their weaknesses, and then they work on their weaknesses. That's kind of like the concept of it.
Yeah, it's kind of a linear version of like, okay, well, how do I get this overarching umbrella of fitness? Which again, like most people are like, I have no idea how to do that. And you know, realistically, like most people just come into the gym, and as long as the programming isn't super wacky, they start working on a lot of different things. So they get a little bit stronger, they get a little bit faster, they get a little bit more agile, they start working all the 10 general physical skills. But
Which
at some point, which is great, right?
Yeah,
and
it's super fun.
There's some beauty in the ignorance of like being new, right? Because once you dive down the rabbit hole, then it like quasi becomes maddening. But so I to some degree miss that part of being a CrossFitter. So like walking and be like, hey, what are we doing today? You know, just like
right.
I do miss that, and I like genuinely appreciate when the new people come in. They're just like, yeah, I'm just here. I have no idea what's going on, but I'm here because it's great.
Yeah, super fun.
But it does kind of make that whole process a little bit more linear and breaks down what's the next immediate target, you know, versus like, I want to do Amanda, right? I want to do 9-7-5 of muscle up and snatch, right? Well, there's a pretty linear path, which most people would not agree with. But there actually is a fairly linear path in order to do that. Right. So this is where I think it can be valuable, but where it's probably more valuable is not the fitness component of it, right? Like they're going to get fitter, but a little bit more along the lines of something you mentioned earlier, which probably most people probably glazed over, which is the power of moments, which I know you're super big on.
Yeah, it's the human element, right? Is like, it's the achievement. Someone comes in a normal environment, like what we were talking about, there's so many things to be working on. So one day I'm doing this and this and this, but I don't really have handles on where I am. And I have the PR belt, but it's not really quantified. And I can set goals like I want to deadlift 5 pounds more. But when you attach this outside label of a color or some sort of achievement, it just gives you an opportunity to highlight that. And as an owner, that's like big time number one thing is you got to be hammering on like people's achievements and rewarding them, because they're not getting that in their normal life, right? Nobody's getting what they really want,
especially not now.
Yeah,
especially not now. Yeah, so that's where I think it's important. I also think it's super valuable. So as you start your coaching journey, one of the things that you start to become far more in tune with is what appropriate scaling looks like. And I think I'm fortunate enough at this point, which I could still get better at, but I'm fortunate enough where I think 99 times out of 100, you give me any athlete and give me any workout, I can pretty accurately determine the stimulus, and I can pretty accurately get them into the stimulus without a ton of thought. I've just done enough classes and done enough coaching at this point. But for people that don't have, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, 12 years under their belt of coaching, or haven't been an affiliate for a long period of time, haven't had the fortune of working with other people that are better than them, what this does is it kind of removes that burden of having to have knowledge that you shouldn't have yet, right? Meaning like, okay, well, I don't know that yet because I started 3 months ago. But this kind of outlines basically what we should be targeting here. I think for a lot of newer coaches or newer staff or gyms that don't necessarily have that kind of expertise in-house, this is super valuable to get them in a spot where they're just like making good decisions with regard to people's fitness on a daily basis.
Yeah, the decision making, I mean, man, it's like 12 years, that's unconscious competence now. Like you don't even really have to think about it. You can't even really explain why you come to the conclusions. It's just the feeling. Boom. Like, and someone's like, why is this? And it's like, well, I don't really know.
How much time do we have? Yeah.
Right, exactly. And so like when you have new coaches, and this is a big problem with gyms, is like, you have a coach that's with you, and they start to get really good, and then they're getting better and better, and inevitably somebody eventually might want to do their own thing. They might want to go
Mhm.
off, and so you're churning out, and you have new people coming in, and how do you speed up their process? Or if you can't, I mean, you can speed up the process through the learning, but how do you just make it so each class is going to be safe, and there's going to be a consistent, systematic way of delivering the same service every time, and people
Mhm.
are getting the same sort of scales and that sort of thing. And that's really, the level method really helps with that, because it's giving people a framework, and so it's limiting the number of decisions that a coach has to make. So they're still making decisions, but it's now within sort of this confine of like,
It's
you can't
controlled.
go to, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It's like you can't do something way out, and then you come into class, you're like, why did you have them do that? It's like, well, I thought that was good, you know.
That's what I did 10 years ago. Like, yeah, it wasn't good then. It's not good now. Yeah. So I think that's where it can be super, super helpful for new coaches. Along with, again, just one of the things that myself specifically, and I would even say our gym has failed at over the years, is not only aggressively, but just consciously moving the goalpost back for people, right, in
Mhm.
this journey of fitness, right, saying, okay, well, yeah, we want to be at X by Y, right? That's the, if you haven't read the book, the Four Disciplines of Execution, that's one of their big
Oh,
things,
it's a
like
great one.
quantifiable goals. um the What this does, because I mean, I learned a lot from it, and I told you this when we talked about, when we went through it, however long ago that was. There's so many more steps that we probably just haven't thought about between getting from A to B. Like, think of it like a tape measure. A lot of us are like, I'm going to go from inch number 1 to inch number 2. And I'm like, well, yeah, but there's 16 increments between there that I haven't really put enough thought into, that could be super beneficial. And that's where I thought it was valuable. It's just like, oh, I didn't, yeah, that is a better option than having them do what I was going to have them do. And that's where I think it's that you guys have stuck so many more options that still kind of work out linearly to progress people along the path, that I think it's really valuable in that aspect as well.
Yeah, it's like it brings up the question of like how do mastery and the basics and the fundamentals, and people more often than not wanting to go a lot faster than they should go. This is something that people just, they see something that somebody does, and this is like in every gym in the history of the planet. Someone walks in and they see someone doing some amazing stuff, and they're like, I want to do that. I want to make other people feel the way I'm feeling right now looking at that person do that thing. That's like what they
Exactly.
think, right?
Yep.
And in order to get there, it requires a ton of discipline and focus and time. And if a great example of that is like Cirque du Soleil, right? If you
Yep.
look at Cirque du Soleil and you watch these guys and you're like, I don't even have a clue as to how they do it. And I guarantee you, they're not going back and doing what they're doing for their training. They're doing
Hmm.
like all sorts of really fundamental movement balancing, really sort of really boring type of stuff, but it's
Hmm.
been progressively loaded over many, many, many years. And so this is a lot of things, pulling those clients back and then letting them see the journey and the path and plugging them into that. Then they just get so much better over time because they can see it. But it's hard to do. It's like one of the big things is everybody wants to jump ahead and they want to speed it up, but it's like it's kind of boring to take a step back, but it is the pathway to mastery.
It's boring to step back and do that, typically, in my experience, because the path is not clear, right?
Mm,
So I'll give you an example. So the coach, I watch somebody do muscle ups, or attempt muscle ups is a better option. They fail at muscle ups, and then as a coach, I'm like, hey, we just need to work on some upper body pulling, because you physically can't pull the rings to a point where you could make a transition anyway. And that is correct. However, that's an identification of the problem. It's not a
right.
solution to solve the problem that gets them to where they want to be, which is on top of the rings, having completed a successful muscle up. So this idea that, like, hey, you just need to work on some pulling, while it is correct, it is not adequate
Hmm.
to get this person and to give them a visualization to say, oh, I clearly understand what this path looks like, and
Right, right.
how I need to navigate it in order to get there. So again, another added value there that I think can really shed some light for some newer coaches that don't have a big Rolodex of scaling options. And kind of going back to what you mentioned earlier, the unconscious competence is, it's one of those things where occasionally I'll break out a scaling option or a drill or something that
No
I
one's
forgot
seen.
about.
And
That
you
I've
don't even
well,
know.
no, no, I've
Like, what
definitely
the hell?
never I've definitely never created anything in my life, but I will occasionally pull something out that I forgot about
Mm.
and I haven't used in probably years, and then people are like, "I've never seen that before," and I'm like, "That's not new. Number one, I just haven't used it in a long time, and couldn't even explain to you why that came to mind right now. Something happened. I was like, oh, I've got a drill for that, and then I pulled that out, and then we used it, and it was effective. But that's not a good plan. That's a shitty plan, honestly. You know?
Yeah, it's like you look at the old school, like every once in a while I'll go through CrossFit back from like the archives of like 2003,
Some
2004.
gems in there.
Oh, dude, it is just like I can't believe the level of creativity and all these things. And it's just like I can see how, you know, why it caught on so much, and it's like it's just so good. And then obviously it evolves and morphs over many years, and then we get to the sport of fitness, and now it's confined into a set number of things, and it's like, but you go back to the original and all those same things are still there ready to use, and there's all sorts of crazy drills and great ways. Like one of the great things about CrossFit is just their how well they teach
Mm-hmm.
concepts. Like it's just so cool, the different things and the way to explain. And that was really what hooked me in the early days. I'm like, damn,
Mm-hmm.
my mind was just blown in terms of the
Yep.
elegance of some of these descriptions and stuff,
Yeah, I think it was that I do think they do well, and I've been fortunate to see kind of the inside of the machine, obviously, and been part of that delivery. But that's me kind of like sitting on the shoulders of other people, basically just being a copycat, quite frankly, and just over the time adding my own little flavor to it and my experience. Um, but all that stuff is really cool. So obviously people are going to go kind of check out what you guys do, but kind of but you guys do you guys have two different things, and correct me if I'm wrong because I know some things have changed. You have the level method, which is just this system of tracking and progressing people through, but you also do programming as well, correct?
Yeah, so programming is a whole separate it's essentially a different company. Like
Yeah.
originally when I built it out, I was in my gym and I was doing my own programming for my gym, and the level method was a system that I started like just chatting with my other gym owner friends, and we were kind of getting into the low key into different places. And then as we started growing, we were just inundated with the requests for programming because it makes sense to tie it in with the levels and to do all
Yeah.
those sorts of things. So a year and a half ago, we started doing programming, and then it was just a roller coaster of all sorts of learning. We overhauled it many times. And so now, yeah, it's a totally different deliverable, but it's tied in with level method. And it's all built around the levels, progressions, and, that sort of stuff. But it's a massive project.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't disagree at all, and I don't even know probably half of it, but it does make sense because, hey, if we're trying to tee up these moments, well, I want to do that intentionally. I don't want to just hope that we program something that allows us to check this box. I want that to be set up systematically. Again, going back to what we were discussing before we hit record, which is like the difference between automation and systemization is like if I'm writing programming, the programming should be written intentionally to achieve a specific goal. And in your case, with regard to the level method, what they're doing is I'm writing this to create a moment, right? When that moment is a celebration of somebody's success, right? So if you unpack this the whole way, it has nothing to do with programming, it has nothing to do with fitness. It's about celebrating a success and creating a moment for somebody that allows them to stay on the path of fitness and get the results long term, because we all know if you own a gym, turnover is a real thing. I don't care how much you tout retention, people turn over. Like it's impossible to negate that completely, but you can do a lot to minimize it, like to get to that 1% churn. And that is only if people love it and their experience is amazing. So
Right. Yeah.
I think,
One of the big things with the programming is, the assessment cycles are something that's built into the level method, and that's really what produces the powerful moments. And originally the programming itself was really for me as a member, I know that I'm yellow or orange or whatever, and the coach knows that I'm that level. And so it makes the scaling and the delivery within class much more streamlined. We have big TV screens where all the workouts are up there. They're leveled out. Someone comes in, they know exactly what they're doing. Now, what
Got
you're
it.
saying, though, what you are saying is actually the direction that we're going, which is Legion 2.0 programming, which is now the tests are built within the programming over
Got it.
time, like spread out, as opposed to doing these massive assessment cycles. We still have that
Yeah.
option, but the
Yep.
big assessment cycles, it's intensive and it can burn people out. Some people like to do it because they're that sort of, gym, and then other people don't. So we're
Well,
kind
the
of
problem with
maneuvering.
the problem with that is like that might be how I work, but that's that's negating that there's somebody else on the other side of that equation. So like that's probably not how your members work.
Right.
I mean, listen, don't get me started on like if you change anything in the gym, people will lose their mind. Be like, if you
Oh,
move the barbells 3 feet, like people are like, what'd you do with the barbells? I'm like, look 6 inches to the right. Like it's right there. So yeah, that was something when we did the assessment, that was a friction point for us, right? It was just like, oh man, it was just like, people are just like, I don't like this. And it wasn't that they didn't like it. It's just that it was different,
right.
right?
And it's ownership, right? People take ownership of their gym, their thing. So if people really understand the why behind it, it can work. And, it obviously does work and people do it. But, if there's a lot of changes, that's the thing that really causes problems. It's
Yeah.
like an overhaul, and they don't understand the vision, the code, they don't understand the why, they don't understand these long-term things. And then it's just like, hey, we're changing all this stuff. That is almost, that's the biggest thing.
Yeah. This is definitely not something you should roll out if you're doing a lot of other changes at the
Right.
same time. Like I'll give you another weird example. So we were messing around with programming, like how we wrote it. And for the most part, like the programming didn't change. I mean, it's like if you look at the flavor, like if I just gave you like these are the workouts and this is the variations of the workout over the past 6 months, you'd be like, same person wrote it, right? Like even though that's not true. But because we displayed it differently in Wodify, I mean, you'd have thought that we were stealing money from people. Like
Yeah.
people were like, I can't
Pissed.
even read this. This is ridiculous. This programming is insane. And they're like, I can't even find the workout. And I'm like, A, you haven't done the workout. You haven't been in a week. Well, I don't know what you're
Right.
talking about. So I went in and I just rearranged it and I moved a couple things around. And then the response was like, all right, back to normal. And I'm like, oh my God.
Well, I
Like,
mean, this is one of my biggest pet peeves with gyms is the when they let their members completely run and lead. And it's like the coaches and the owners have so much experience. They know what's
oh,
going on, and it's like they're the experts. And then a gym member that's been doing fitness for 6 months goes and complains, and it's like, dude, what are you doing? Like, how are you? This is not how it's supposed to work.
I'm not sure. I talked to John Briggs about this too, because John Briggs, because I think you know John, he owns Insight
Yeah.
Tax, and he was just like, there is no. So John is a accountant by trade, but also owns a gym, and he was like, there is no other business on planet Earth where the customers think they know as much as the person running the
Dude, it's
business.
so crazy. It's so crazy. It's like years and years of this. It's like people,
People are
they
like,
come in.
they just lose their mind. They're just like, I think this is ridiculous. I'm like, how many PRs did you have last month? They're like, a lot. And I'm like, how long have I been doing this? They're like, way longer than me. And I'm just like, I don't know what we're talking about right now.
Right, totally. It's like we'll get this stuff, and it's like, you know, people say, "Hey, my members are saying this." It's like, well, you have a conversation with your members and educate them on the reasoning behind all this. You know what I mean? It's just like that's one of my biggest pet peeves.
Yeah, it is. It's definitely something every single gym owner has to navigate. And while it is comical, it is something you have to navigate. And I think
For
the
sure.
answer to that is exactly what you just said is I would more often than not, and I'm throwing myself in this bucket very much, throwing myself under the bus here, and I've gotten better at it over years, is communication is key. Like you have to, one of my kind of friends slash mentors, he's He owns he's a client of mine. He owns 2 Chick-fil-A's, right? So
Okay.
to get a Chick-fil-A restaurant, like they'll take 25,000 applications to get one. And then if you are fortunate enough to have your hat thrown in to get a second location, now you're the 1% of the 1%. So this dude's are like really sharp. And he gave me some feedback because we were doing some projects together on the side, and he was like, "Hey, listen, you," and this was a problem that I unknowingly had from the military, which is I tell you what to do and you do it, and you don't ask
There's
questions.
there's no like, it's just like, do this. Okay.
Yeah,
Order.
go. And they're like, yes sir, go. But that's not how the way the real world works, and it's definitely not how client, customer, and provider works, right? Like you have to be what is described as a vision caster, and that is a
Exactly.
skill that you have to develop over time. Like I have to clearly be able to define this vision, and not only define it but pitch it to you so that you buy in. And that I've been really awful at in the past, and I would consider myself to be mediocre at it now. But it is one of the fundamental skills. Like if you're going to be the leader of a tribe, which you are if you own a gym, you have to start honing that skill. Like your communication needs to become one of your super skills.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because like to do it without ego, so like
Correct.
to do it without like you're explaining it to them with patience, and that like it's just going to take a little while for you to understand, like from that perspective, because it's like the ego pops up and it's like they should know, or they should just listen to me because I'm this, like well, kind of like it might be true, but at the same time, like you've got to meet them and really help them understand over time.
And what should be acknowledged is your new folks don't know any different. Like if they've been there for a year or less, those are not my kind of air quotes problem children. The problem children are also more often than not my best clients, right?
Mm-hmm.
The clients that have been here for 6 years, they have some ownership of the place. Like they
Right.
feel like they have a little bit of buy-in there. And so those are the people that, in my experience, like you might need to give them a preview of that.
Exactly. Bring
Not
them in.
bring them in, right? And I'm not saying give them say so. That's not what I'm saying at all.
Right.
But like you can mitigate this problem and bring them into the process. Be like, hey, you guys are our, like one of the things we're getting ready to roll as an ambassador program, but bring them in and say, hey, you guys are ambassadors. You guys fly the flag. Everybody looks up to you. We need you to help us roll this out. I need to explain to you the why. So almost consider them as part of the staff. Like they need to understand that
Exactly.
vision too. So now they can communicate it because they're the ones that have the ear of everybody else.
Exactly.
Right. Like they're your mavens, if you will. So you have to really figure out how to communicate to them and maybe even do it with them uniquely before you launch like the massive changes are coming.
Yeah, it's like when we navigated this, I mean, the perfect example for me personally is when we navigated this gym move. So it's about the most human, like there's so many human variables in this project. So we had this idea, we're going to move the gym membership to another gym, into another community with a different set of values and all sorts of stuff. And to do that, for me to just be like, hey guys, this is what's happening, everyone would just leave, right? Like there'd be like, what the hell? So it was like, there was a 6-month process where in the very early part, I brought in individual conversations with all the coaches and the most, veteran members.
Yep.
And then it sort of escalated. Then we did a call where I was explaining it, and I was hammered by questions, every possible question. And you just got to sit there and take it and answer the questions and
Yep.
let them see that they're still part of it and that they're being heard, all of that sort of stuff. And then, the project worked. It actually was successful, but it's like without that element, it's going to be an utter failure every single time, because you've got to respect each person, right? And like let them have their voice.
I also think it's worth at least acknowledging that when you go through changes like that, you're looking through it via different lenses, right? So typically if I'm the one facilitating change, my focus is like the pluses. These are all the good things that are going to happen. When they only see change, which is usually all bad, right? So you have to acknowledge that, be like, yes, there's all these good things. Like you have to address people's fears, their concerns, and then start talking about the good stuff. But you can't just ignore the fact that people are freaked out that you changed a lot of stuff. And
Yeah,
then
and
you
it's
have
like,
to figure out like what's the appropriate pace at which to roll these changes out so they have time to acclimate.
yeah, exactly. It's like when you look at sales copy or copywriting, I'm a big copywriting. It's overcoming objections, right?
Hmm.
So you list out. So like just as a quick actual example, we're moving to a different place. So people have questions around what's the parking going to be like? What's the prices going to be changed like?
What's the
What's the
schedule?
what's the schedule? All of these issues. So we actually literally wrote out all these things and then we address every single one of them up front. So then they're like, oh, they're proactive, they're thinking about this stuff. So it's like that's a great point. That's like overcoming each one of those specific objections, indicating that you thought it through, right? That's the most important thing. You've thought it
That's the
through.
key. You thought it through. It at least has to somewhat appear that you've put some time and effort into
Yeah,
addressing like what their fears are. And if
exactly.
and you don't have to hit them all. Like I would even tell you that if you hit above 50%, you've
You're
probably mitigated most concerns, because I can always follow that up with, hey guys, we know you have more questions.
right,
We're going to continue to answer these over time. We don't have answers for all of them yet, but we know you have these questions.
right.
I think that's super important. Um, so you guys are making changes to that, to the programming. Can you give us like a sneak peek on that, or is the big change just removing the assessment periods?
Yeah, so there's a whole bunch of different things that are happening. A yearly cycle in terms of basing things on themes.
Okay.
So making sure that there are fun things that are happening,
Yep.
that there are different implement themes, kettlebell or whatever. And then a big thing with the pandemic is we've moved for the next 6 to 8 weeks. So we were delivering at-home programming. So
Okay.
what ended up happening was this happened. We put the core deliverable of the gym programming on the back burner, and we're redoing programs from last year. So we're just sort of delivering that, but then we shifted all of our focus to at-home programs. So this was all body weight stuff. We
Yep.
delivered 11 weeks or 77 days of that. Now we've moved back to our core deliverable because gyms are starting to open.
Hmm.
And so now there's a whole bunch of new set of things that are most important. Number one, most important thing is that the members feel safe. And that
Hmm.
they're coming in and they're not having to freaking cross breathe and walk against each other and like go get a bunch of equipment and put the equipment back. So for us, everything is now self-contained units.
Hmm.
So we have like everything's designed to be built into a thing where a client comes in and they just have to stay in place essentially for the
Yep.
whole workout. And that's a new creative challenge. And I love that. I love that those sorts of challenges.
Well, I think for that, I mean, there are businesses that are built on that model. Like Orange Theory is one of them. But like, this is your
Mm-hmm.
station. Now, not every gym can facilitate that, largely because they weren't designed with that in mind. So,
Right.
cross traffic wasn't something that when I designed. Well, because most people don't design their gym. I lease a space, and it is what it
Right.
is. So I just have to deal with it. But now people are thinking about that, which is good. People are thinking about what's the logistics. What is my actual operational capacity, like how many athletes can I put in here safely, but also I think the unintended consequence of that is going to be people are going to come out of this with much better organizational skills. Like
For
the
sure.
classes, I mean, I can tell you the number of gyms I've been into where there was just no organization. I mean, it was just basically like a free for all. Like the coach didn't tell people where to put their equipment. It was like there was a line of barbells in the worst possible place ever, like right in front of the roll up door when there's running. And I'm like, we didn't think this through, did we? Like
Right.
so stuff like that. So I think now what this is going to help people with is, if we're going to use like the CrossFit level 2, the 6 criteria, group management. This is part of
Mm-hmm.
group management, like your ability to manage a group and make sure that people can feel safe, feel organized, but it's also going to make your class more efficient. Like
Yeah.
I'm not waiting for the 6-minute transition for everybody to get their barbell, because, people can't figure out which ones are the men's and which ones are the women's, even though they've been there for
Yeah.
6 years,
So, I don't know if you know Oscar from, he's in Sweden, and he like a two-brain guy. And
Uh-huh.
early on in the programming, I come from a individual program design background. So that's sort
Yep.
of like the way I approach a lot of stuff. And so it's sort of sometime in the early days of gym programming, it was kind of on the boring side in some cases, logistically kind of weird. And I got
Yep.
the feedback from him about flow, like, hey, let's work on the flow of the class more. And so I put my attention on that, and we just doubled down on that. So the flow was really good. But now with this pandemic, it has taken that idea and put it on steroids. Now we're thinking of every single possible. So the warm up ties in directly into the workout with, in terms of equipment and everything, all
Yeah.
tied. And so it's very streamlined, and I don't have to be going back and forth and getting a bunch of stuff, but it's all been thought out beforehand. And so it's a cool opportunity. We're going to take a lot of these concepts moving forward and continue to kind of implement them. But the programming project is always evolving. You know, that's just how it is, because there's so many things to do and learn.
So many things to do. And I think, again, it's one, like, we get questions all the time, and I get questions like the DM just all day long, be like, hey, how do I'm trying to run a more efficient class. Like, what's the best thing I could do to make myself more efficient? And it sounds like a weird punt answer, but it's not. I'm like, do you prepare? Like,
Right.
What is the preparation on the front end for this class? Like, if you haven't walked through your own lesson plan, if you haven't thought about the scenario of, what if I have 15 people in the class and I have 10 rowers? Like, what do I do? If I haven't thought about things like, what if we run out of barbells? If I haven't thought
And
about
then you're
things
like,
like,
in the
right?
moment, like,
Yeah.
like
So
a dumbass.
it's one of those things where I'm like, hey, listen, in order to be yourself, right? So, like, let's say you do have like a good personality, like, in order for the class to be fun, right? In order for people to smile, in order for me to think about having a human interaction rather than facilitating a class, like, I'm doing both simultaneously. But if I want my athletes to feel acknowledged and
Or plan
get,
for it.
yeah, plan for it, right? If I want to have the bandwidth to have these interactions that are important, I can't be thinking about all that other stuff. That all needs to be done beforehand. The
Exactly.
lesson plan, where the equipment's going to go, where I want to be at what time, and how we're going to do that. That's when you see a class when you're like, that was amazing. Like, that coach taught a lot. Everybody was having a good time. The 30 minutes felt like 5 for the warm up. Like, that's not an accident, right? None of that is by accident. That is all somebody who's has a plan, understands what they're supposed to be doing, has dialed in the components of being a technician, but then really is leveraging and pulling those levers of human interaction, right? Having those one-on-one conversations, saying names, getting touch points, all those things. It's all the preparation on the front end. So I'm hoping people are starting to realize that, and that curtain, whether it's accidentally pulled back or not, is starting to really come to light for people.
Yeah, it's like what you just described is like success, right? A successful class is built on intention. And at
Yep.
a micro level, you have this micro experience of the class. If you go out a couple levels higher, it's the same set of skills, just at a bigger, higher level. And it's like with the gym, be intentional, plan your stuff out, have the outcome defined, and then build your plan to do it and make it happen. But it goes down all the way through every level, and it's like, it's a great example of living intentionally with your classes and with everything. Intention and planning. You can't, what the hell else are you going to do?
Well, I think the tough part, and again, I've been this person, and I actually used this kind of COVID shutdown to restructure, to redefine all of those things. Yeah, right. It's to free up bandwidth, and but most of us get into it because, like, we were passionate about it, like, it had some sort of significant impact on our lives, and then we just go through the constant fire drill of, like, trying to be successful, and that rat race doesn't end well if you can't figure out how to pull yourself out of there, start to streamline things, figure out how to remove all the things from your plate by whatever. Maybe it's using a VA, maybe it's just planning a little bit better, and then figure out, like, how do I do the most important thing, which is create these moments, have these touch points, because that's what brings people back. Like, nobody gives a shit of how good you are teaching the snatch. Like, I don't care. There's like one person, it's like Coach Bergner. Everybody's like, yeah, I would love that dude to teach me the snatch, but that's it. Like, he's like the only guy. Outside of that, they just need to, yeah, right. And that's because he's who he is, and he's also charismatic, right? He's also, and if you've ever been in one of his classes, he's doing that as well. He's having those interactions. It's not that he teaches the snatch better than anybody else. It's that his class is more enjoyable than everybody else.
Yeah, it's the qualitative aspects of it. It's not just the snatch itself. It's the elements. But
yeah,
I was gonna say something, but I forgot now.
That's all
What were
right.
you
I forget
what
so
were you
many.
just saying before that?
I don't know. I was rambling. Um, we'll come back to it.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's I'm really curious to see how people come out of this and like what tweaks and stuff that they've made to their processes and all that stuff. I think it's gonna be cool. This is realistically a time where I think it's option. I think it was a potentially good time for CrossFit as a whole to come out better.
Yeah, I think like there's a lot of things like I remember what I was going to say was about bandwidth and
Yep.
warrior stuff. So in that mythological sort of
Yep.
ideal, you have king and warrior, and you need both. The king is the planner, the person that's looking at the high level and directing and offering blessings and all these sort of things. Then you have the warrior, who's the person that's in the grind, that's doing it. It's the person on the floor. And I mean, I spent the first 4 or 5 years as that person, just grinding, going, doing classes, trying to figure out, and never really getting any traction. And so the best recommendation that I have around that specifically, if anybody's finding themselves in that position where it's just difficult to get traction, you got to block out nice chunks of time specifically on the calendar for thinking time. And I learned that, I don't know, 10 years ago, and it was always in my head a great idea, like, yeah, I should probably do that. But once you do that and you start to think things through and you go through all of the things that you've been meaning to do and you get them done, then you can really start getting that traction. And I think that's one thing that the pandemic for a lot of people has allowed. It's allowed some breathing room of like, let's alleviate that day-to-day operation. And a lot of people just took the time to rest. They didn't even really do the planning, which is great because the
Also
adrenals need,
important. Yeah.
the adrenal, everything needs to kind of come up to place. But now as you're coming forward, identifying what the thing is that you want, identifying the parameters for the success. So like in classes, identifying what they want. And the only way to do that in a pragmatic level is to schedule it. You've
Yeah.
got to schedule it. It comes down just to that. Schedule it and make it happen. It's the only way.
It was so I've been working with Marcus Gersey for past and he and I've been friends for years, but this is the second time I've worked with him on a professional level. And that was one of the first things we kind of went through was like, hey, let's clear all the clutter and just let's identify like, what do you want?
Exactly.
And I'm like, oh, and I'm like, that's a good
Why
question.
the hell didn't I?
That seems so profound.
Yeah.
But it's important, but it's really difficult. Again, like, and I still to some extent live that life every single day. It's hard to cut that time out because the gym is going and it's hustle and bustle and people are walking by my office and they're like, you got a second? I'm like, not really, but come on in, So it's that, but that really is what it was, is like I had a lot of time to sit and think and just unpack my own thoughts and my own feelings and figure out like, what am I happy with? What am I not happy with? Why am I not happy with it? Should I get rid of that or should I just fix it or what, and then
Right.
what is the next thing that I could do that would actually like be twofold, make me happy, which is then probably going to make my members really damn happy because I know what's important to me, which is making them happy, but I got to be happy in order to do that. So I hope people have used this time to do that. And I was just telling Marcus the other day, I was like last week, I think it was, I was like, this is the first week in a long time where I was like, man, that was like good work day. Like I felt good
Oh,
about
hell
the
yeah.
day.
The best.
I had like good moments. Like I got to interact with people. Like I got shit done, and it felt like there was forward progress versus just feeling busy.
Yeah, it's like there's an acronym OPA, and you have this the definition. Anytime you feel, I do these all the time. In every day I do them, for my weeks I do them, in the moment I'll do them if I'm like confused about something, and it's outcome, purpose, action. So
Okay.
you have your outcome. So what you said earlier about casting vision,
Mm-hmm.
that's a skill. It's very difficult to do, but it goes from a big level down to the little level. Like, what do you want? So if like you want to have an outstanding day, you're like, I want to have just an outstanding day. Okay, that's the outcome. Now, why do you want it? Because you're going to end the day, you're going to feel fulfilled, you're going to feel satisfied. You're going to feel like, man, I can sleep well. At the end of your night, you feel totally good. Okay, now what actions would need to happen in order for that to happen? For you to have, so what are the literal actions that would have to go onto the schedule for that to happen? Then you rank them in priority, And then you have your recipe for your day. And this recipe, what I found in my own life, is the recipe pretty much stays consistent. I mean, sometimes it'll change, but
Yep.
once you know your recipe and you can bring yourself back to your recipe, like I'll take walks, I'll do some breathing, and it's like, I know that when I do those things, I feel better. So that's why I do them, because I have this outcome of wanting to feel like I had a really great day. And so once you've defined that, then you have your little recipe, and you might have it with other things in your business or whatever. What do you want? Okay, well, what needs to happen? What's the priorities, right? It's like
it's
everything.
important, but most people that get into the game of training, like, are givers, right? They want to help other people. And then we fall into the trap of, we do it at our own expense.
Exactly.
Right? Like, I'm going to give and I'm going to give and I'm going to give. And it's like, hey man, you can't pour from a cup that's empty. Like, that's just not helping anybody.
It's not
so,
gonna help.
And I'll give everybody a perfect example. So I'm in this schedule. I'm like, it's really, really good. And then I have a client who came back. She was doing some COVID stuff out in San Francisco. She's a nurse and just like crushing herself. She's like, hey, I really want to get back into some personal training. She's like, my only option is the morning. So I was like, cool. I was like, I'll do it, but it's 3 weeks, because I know how I operate best, and because she wants to do it early morning. And it has nothing to do with me wanting to get up early in the morning. It doesn't matter. But when I do, it's my time, right? So like in the mornings is typically where like I get my day together, and I can plan.
It's gonna derail everything, right?
Yeah, it will. So I'm not gonna be able to do that, and I know that my efficiency is going to drop in those 3 weeks, and that's why I was like, hey, it's 3 weeks, and that's what I'll give you, and then we're gonna figure out something else after that. But like, I'm gonna give you those 3 weeks. Because of what you just went through, and I'm trying to get you back on track.
And it's a compromise, but that clarity that you have, knowing that the sacred time is so important for you to be able to be fulfilled in other areas. This is something that most people, they're not living with intention in that way. They're not seeing that, like, if I give this up, I've done it before, and every single freaking time I do it, it just ruins all sorts of things, and the wheels come off in all sorts of ways that I didn't anticipate, you know?
Yep. So it's one of those things where you have to say no, and it's like, oh, well, they're going to pay me for personal training. I'm like, yeah, but could you not make that up somewhere else by just having the time that you need and doing it a different way? So yeah, I don't think it's like you should never let those boundaries be breached, but like, you just have to be aware, and go back to what you said, you have to break them intentionally. Like, if you're going to break it, you have to knowingly break it and be like, oh, I'm going to break it for this time, and then I'm going to go back to it because that's what I need, because that's what the team needs, and that's what the gym needs.
Exactly.
So, well, dude, this has been awesome. I'm pumped up. I'm finished close. I'm finished coaching classes, but I'm ready to go again.
Well, it's like, dude. So just last night, I call them OPAs. The framework of OPA is also known as RPM: Results, Purpose, Massive Action Plan, which is the entire system that Tony Robbins put together in a course called Time of Your Life, which is a I've gone to that course I don't know how many times.
Oh, really?
Oh man, that's like one of my biggest obsessions is that, because it's like
Jay went to one of his a long time ago, and like, I actually always thought Tony Robbins was a weirdo until I started doing some. I mean, he probably is a little bit weird, but I started looking into it, and I was just like, oh no, this is legit. And like, the number of people that I've talked to that have gone to, and somebody I was talking to just recently went one, and they were sitting next to this. I think this dude's like a billionaire with a B. And he was talking to him, and he put him at this table, and he's like, I come to this course twice a year.
Dude, it is. I went to the Unleash the Power Within last summer, and I walked on the coals and all that shit. You know, like, do it like dude, you're jumping around like you feel like a complete retard. Like, but it's all right. It's like that. It's part of the experience. You're doing it for a whole bunch of meta reasons, and you're just going through the experience of it. But I left that thing like with a whole new like view of like training yourself through different modes, right? Using different, state and beliefs and all this sort of stuff. But the course that he has, you can get it. It's like $250 and you just get it. It's RPM, and he walks you through this whole thing. And it is a ridiculously intensive course. It is the most, to get through it. Is it
like you do it online, or how does it work?
No, it's audio. So he has audio. There's like a workbook and all this sort of stuff. And I've been, for the past couple of years, I've probably gone through it 10 times. I just going, because it's so confusing in like a weird like way. And so, but I've implemented it a lot in all of my planning. But I do OPAs for like my evening. So sometimes I'll have just a badass day, and I'm like, all of my project work, I'm running 15 projects of different sorts
Mhm.
of, I'm saying with you, right? All these different
Yeah.
projects, and you have to know when to plug into the project to get the project moving forward. And then you have to come out of the project and go into another project. And,
Yep.
you have these things throughout the day. So I'm just having this blazing day. I finish my day. And then I'm like, my mind is like, well, what do I want to do now? And I'm like, I have all these things. I'm like, oh, I could do this. I could read that. I have this other thing that I want to do. And so all it goes is onto a list, and I do an OPA, and boom, I freaking have my recipe in 10 minutes. And I'm like,
Yeah.
man, it's so freeing. It's like the most amazing thing.
That's what I've come to know about myself is I can be a little scatterbrained, and I've described myself as like I'm the king of just building the plane while you fly it. I'm just like, fuck it, we'll figure it out. Like
Right.
and I know, like, so unpacking why I'm like that, because in the military, like it was like a supply planner, right? Supply logistics, and it's a disaster, right? Like everybody's just like, hey, we need you to solve this problem. So you just become the
Damn.
king of solving people's problems and be like, don't ask me how we did it, like, but here's the result, right? So knowing that I get joy out of basically like achieving tasks is something you have to tee up for yourself. So like what I'll do is every day I'm like, what are the 3 things that I need to do today? Not that are necessarily going to make me feel good, but I'm like, what are the 3 things that if I don't do today are going to annoy me to no end when I go to sleep at night, right? Which then gives me joy that I got them done, but I have to identify them differently now.
The
And I'm like,
negative.
yeah, I'm like, what is going to piss me off
Right.
if I don't have it get to check that box by the end of the day? And I'm like, all right, that goes on the list. Like that's got to happen today.
Yeah.
And I found that I've had better success with that than I do with, because I'm not necessarily looking for like wins, right? Like that's just the way I am. I'm not looking for pats on the back or anything like that. I'm just like I get really annoyed from failure, and if I don't get it done, then it becomes a failure. So I think unpacking things like that is super important as well.
Yeah, I look for satisfaction. I'm just
Yeah.
looking, I want a satisfied day. I want to end my day with that, like,
Yeah.
I got it done. And I can now disconnect. So every day I disconnect
Mm-hmm.
after I finish my closeout. It's a disconnection of I am unplugged. There's nothing that's going to touch me. It's freedom. It's like that sensation that when you go
Yeah.
on vacation, and you've really
Yep.
taken care of all your shit before you went. And then now you're like,
And you can actually go on vacation.
yeah. Like, and that's like, I'm trying to hit that every day, because then you get these little micro vacations, and the sustaining element is just incredible. Like you can just keep on going, but
Well,
the
then you're that
recipe is
person.
different.
Yeah. And then you're that person who's like, how in the hell how do they operate at that capacity for so long?
Like
Yeah.
you look at artists, you look at these
Yep.
great historical figures, that's what they're doing. Like,
Mhm.
and it's just, if you can figure out what your recipe is and you can have it, and then you can do those things and you finish your day, man, it's like you can't, you live your perfect day, it's your perfect
Yeah.
day each day.
If on the OPA stuff, is that like a form of, I'm still trying to unpack that a little bit. Is that a form of journaling, or do you journal?
Yeah, journaling was probably the first thing that I got into that really started giving me traction on all the freaking craziness in my life, in terms of
Got
like
it.
all the different interests. You don't
Mhm.
take a dive into one thing and then everything else falls away. Then you forget about that and you go to something else. And journaling is, I just do a very simple sort of journal, but the OPA is it's much more planning. It's
Got
much
it.
more defining what it is and having a very clear, and you can go very big. So all of big plans are done in bigger OPA. So you have big
Mhm.
vision. And it goes to your life too. So what's
Yep.
your biggest vision? That drops down into projects. The projects drop down into blocks of actions, which are OPAs. The OPAs then drop down into physical actions. And these all migrate from a year plan down into a monthly or a week plan. I do weekly plans. And then
Got
the
it.
weekly plans, they morph into my daily. So this is actually an example of my week plan. I do a written week plan every day.
Oh, got
Or
it. You're that
every
guy.
week. I'm
You're
that
that
guy.
guy.
Yeah, I'm the guy that
For
does
those
that.
of you who couldn't see that, he's just imagine what you think he pulled up and put on the screen. That's what it is.
Yeah, it's just a bunch of shit that is like listed out with a bunch of different items. And so these things, they trickle down into my days, and I find
Yeah.
I just feel better when I have it done that way.
That's really cool. I dig it. Well, listen, man, we've covered a lot here. I think this is really good, but I don't want to take too much of your time. Anything else you want to throw out there with regard to level method, like stuff you guys got coming down the pipe or any of that stuff?
Well, one of the big things is we're working on substitution categories now. So, like with running or lactic tolerance, doing air bike substitution. So we're developing data so that people that can't necessarily do those tests will have options.
Meaning like
So
quantifying if you're going to run a 400 meter, what would the equivalent be on the bike?
yeah, so like the running is, it goes up to a mile, and the air bike test will have equivalency. So
Got it.
if I can't run, I can do the air bike, and I get my score that way. So that's very cool. And
That
then
is cool.
yeah, that's like one of the big things that we've had people request is having some sort of substitution categories. We're working on a whole bunch.
That's a weird one because again, it's one of those things like unless you've played around with that like 1,000 times, like I'll do this all the time, and they're like, what should I do? And I'm like, switch that, change it over. You're gonna do it for this long. And they're like, how have you done that? I'm like, because I've done it 1,000,000 times. Like I know that it's not a 1-to-1. It's not even a 75-to-1. Like it's this weird number, and I don't even know how to explain that's how the number is, but that's what it is. That's cool though.
Yeah, and so I mean that's a big one. I mean, we have lots of on the programming side, just the Legion 2.0 stuff, and now we're just ramping up everything from a post, hopefully soon post-pandemic perspective of getting everything. What kind of went on hold? Like a lot of different projects went on hold. We just stopped in place. So now we're sort of rebooting a lot of those, but it's cool. Lots of cool stuff.
Yeah. Check them out on Instagram, guys. But you guys do like a newsletter too that people can sign up for, right? Or like a mailing list kind of.
Yeah. If you go there, you can check it all out.
Cool. Well, listen, brother, this was fantastic. I enjoyed it. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
All right. See you guys next time.
See ya.
Thanks for listening to Best Hour of Their Day. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. First of all, it's free. How cool is that? There's a creation tool that allows you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer, so it becomes super simple. Some of these episodes with Fern or Todd or myself chatting with one another, we've done right within the app itself. Anchor will make it easy to distribute your podcast to all platforms, Spotify, Apple, and many more. And you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make an awesome podcast in one place. All you have to do is download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started today. Come on, who doesn't have Spotify at this point? And if you were unaware, Spotify now is offering podcasts. That's right. On Spotify, you can listen to all your favorite artists, but also podcasts in one place for free. Spotify has a huge catalog of podcasts on every topic, including the one you're listening to right now, Best Hour of Their Day. On Spotify, you can follow your favorite podcasts so you never miss an episode. Premium users can even download episodes to listen to offline wherever you are, something I always do before I hop on a plane. And you can even easily share what you're listening to with your friends on Instagram and other social media platforms. Here's the deal. If you haven't done so already, be sure to download the Spotify app, search for Best Hour of Their Day on Spotify, or browse some other podcasts if you want. You can find them in your library tab. And also make sure to follow me so you never miss an episode of Best Hour of Their Day. Thanks again for listening to Best Hour of Their Day. If you haven't already, do us a favor, head over to the Apple Podcast app and leave us a review. We'd love to hear from you. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, feedback for either Fern or myself, hit us up, besthouroftheirday@gmail.com, or send us a DM over on Instagram at Best Hour of Their Day. Once again, we couldn't do this without the amazing community, and you are a part of it. Thanks for listening. Thanks for supporting Best Hour of Their Day.